I grew up in a remote corner of the countryside, where the population hovered just above a few thousand neighbors. Life seemed simple at first, wandering in the fields, climbing oaks, chasing crawly creatures in the dirt. But beneath that sense of wonder, a thick unease filled the air like heavy fog. I grew up aware of a relentless pattern, a historic hostility, one that shook my family and friends whenever they remembered past events. Sometimes, I'd catch glimpses of groups openly marching down our main street, dressed in stark regalia that seemed to preach division. Seeing that spectacle more than once changed my perception of how I should behave, how I should respond, and how I should protect myself. In that environment, I naturally felt pushed toward resentment. Everywhere I looked, the people I cared about carried an undercurrent of tension, a leftover from older wounds. Family and friends had impressions, retold stories, and practiced caution that got passed from one generation to the next. Part of me clung fiercely to my own anger, as if a shield or a barrier. Meanwhile, another part of me remembered moments of kindness that didn't fit the narrative, like fleeting interactions with people outside my immediate circle who truly seemed to care. It created a deep contradiction that I couldn't resolve. By the time I got to college, I was juggling multiple burdens. I kept exploring every kind of spiritual teaching. My mind was a whirlwind of, why are we here? And how does this world even work? Yet the bitterness I carried never went away. If anything, it seemed to spread its roots even deeper. It didn't matter whether I read esoteric books on mystical energies or conferred with people who held different traditions. I was so sure I had every reason to resent. Eventually, my body showed the toll of living in constant tension. My blood pressure soared, my stomach churned, and there were days I was sure I couldn't manage another bite. Sometimes I just stopped eating because the act felt too draining. Stress settled in my bones, in my muscles, in my heart. I convinced myself I carried a mission: fix the unfairness, oppose wrongdoing, single-handedly correct every injustice I saw. The world had to change, or so it seemed, and I believed the path to that change was fueled by my outrage. But then came an unforgettable day, one that upended everything I thought I knew. It was a day overshadowed by odd pains, starting near my back, then radiating to my shoulder. Given my history of muscle tension and disc issues, I shrugged it off, attributing it to old injuries. However, that ache soon wrapped my chest in a pressure I had never felt. At first, while commuting home from work, I wondered if I could just wait it out. Maybe it was another nuisance in a string of pains. The drive, though only a few minutes, felt like an eternity. By the time I parked, that dull ache had turned into a trembling, suffocating dread, as if my body was warning me something critical was happening. I reached out to a family member, and suddenly we were rushing to the hospital. My breathing turned ragged. The world started fading at the edges. When we finally reached the emergency entrance, I tried to remain calm. Nurses whisked me onto a stretcher, but my eyes grew distant. A wave of unconsciousness drowned my senses. Yet, strangely, a part of me stayed alert. I became aware of an unfathomable stillness, like drifting in a quiet ocean of blackness filled with spots of light. My viewpoint left the body I had always called mine, and I found myself gazing from above. In that suspended moment, I felt no pain, no panic, only a compelling sense of absolute clarity. Time lost its meaning. I could see the outlines of figures working tirelessly over my motionless form. Their faces and uniforms were dim, but their energies seemed more vivid than anything my regular senses had ever registered. I noticed someone in the corner, her expression frozen in anguish, almost like she couldn't bear what she thought was happening. Oddly, I felt no fear for my own condition. It was as though I was trying to console her, silently wishing I could convey that beyond this process lay something beautiful and pain-free. In that extraordinary awareness, I realized I remained alive, just not anchored to the body below. I was immersed in a space of pure energy, where questions and answers arrived at the same instant. Words like light, soul, awareness, being rushed through my mind. I understood, with unshakable certainty, that what I'd been calling me was not limited to a human shape, a name, or a litany of experiences. Instead, I was a glowing sphere of consciousness, connected to an endless grid of presence and love. Even the black void enveloping me felt like a gentle embrace, carrying me without judgment. Looking in one direction, I saw a radiance that people often name the light. It was luminous, positioned up and slightly to the right. Down and to the left, I could see the hospital room, like I was perched at the boundary of these two realms. The feeling of oneness, of belonging, was so profound that fear seemed alien to me. There, in that suspended vantage, no labels existed. No anger, no ongoing struggle. Only the recognition that everything was intricately woven together in a tapestry that transcended what I'd called my life. Then, with no warning, a tug or a force yanked me back. I opened my eyes, saw the bright lights of the emergency room, and realized I was back inside a very fragile, exhausted body. A medical professional demanded to know if I was okay. I hardly registered the words at first because I was so taken aback by having a voice again. Gone was the bliss of timelessness, replaced by a sterile, frantic world of machines and tubes. I dared to lift my head, still dazed. I glimpsed defibrillator pads pressed against me, a literal jolt back into ordinary life. In that moment, I realized fully I had been declared lifeless, then resuscitated. Afterward, I found myself in a perplexing state of renewed existence. On one side, I felt unstoppable gratitude, an overflowing sense that I'd been graced with a second shot. On the other side, I was drained, shaken by the intensity of the shift from infinite calm to this physical dimension where conflict, blame, and biased thinking ran rampant. My sense of empathy skyrocketed. Suddenly, whenever I stepped outside, I sensed others' frustrations, heartbreak, and burdens. Even simpler interactions at grocery stores or workplaces felt like standing in a wave of human emotion. I soon realized I couldn't hide away to reflect or properly heal. Practical realities beckoned, and as soon as I was medically stable, it was time to resume normal responsibilities. Yet everything was different. Hours after returning to work, those old triggers barely mattered. Office politics or daily annoyances that used to boil my blood, suddenly they seemed trivial. It felt like all the tension that used to bind me no longer had any real hold. I found more clarity in everyday moments. That renewed outlook had immediate results. Relationships were less rocky, misunderstandings got resolved half as fast, and interactions with people who didn't share my cultural background felt almost effortless. My old storyline, that I should remain guarded, angry, and ready for war, had evaporated in the face of absolute stillness I recalled from my experience. The ultimate guide to living differently, I realized, was leaning into honest accountability. I discovered that every thought, even unspoken rants, could poison my well-being if I let them simmer. Even if I never voiced my prejudices, harboring them affected my body, my mood, and my spirit. This revelation taught me a step-by-step process of self-awareness. Notice the negative emotion, acknowledge its presence, decide if I want it to shape me, and release it if it's too toxic. That might sound simple as a how-to or tutorial, but it's a daily practice, something that demands vigilance and compassion for oneself. I realized my anger had contributed to serious strain on my heart, fueling my health crisis. It drilled home the fact that letting strong emotions rule you is a kind of slow self-destruction. The memory of witnessing my own body lying unresponsive, while I soared above, feeling nothing but boundless love, stays crystal clear. It doesn't mean I'm free from frustration now, or that complicated situations have vanished. Sometimes, old feelings do resurface. Unexpected events rouse the echoes of that hostility I once ballooned into an identity. But now, there's a shift in perspective. Instead of becoming bitterness, I can see bitterness as an emotion passing through, like a storm cloud crossing the sky. I hold on to the knowledge that it doesn't define me. I liken this transformation to the best practices in other fields of self-improvement. You test out fresh approaches, monitor results, refine your methods, and keep yourself adaptable. When negativity arises, I compare that to noticing an error in a computer program. Use viral hacks or the latest trends in mental health, like guided meditation, journaling, or therapy, to debug your system. I've developed my own easy methods to handle internal storms. quiet breathing routines, short walks outside, or a moment of silent gratitude. I might whisper simple affirmations or practice body scans to intervene before the stress spirals. Before my near-death awakening, I clung to the idea that I was championing a righteous fight. And it's true, certain issues in our society absolutely demand attention and solution. But I realized that hatred itself rarely solves the darkness. It just keeps recycling it. My lived experience showed me how I nearly destroyed my health, physically, mentally, emotionally, by letting rage take root. Now, any top 10 strategies for navigating racial injustice or handling life's biggest disappointments must, in my view, include a reminder that healing your inner lens is vital. Without it, the cycle exhausts everyone involved. Another surprise from that out-of-body vantage was how none of my usual labels mattered. Everything that typically defined me, my background, my race, my personal history, slipped away. What remained was an observer enthralled by how grand, unified and loving the cosmos can be. Some might call it a behind-the-scenes look at creation. Others might dismiss it as wishful thinking. For me, it was the ultimate guide to understanding that no one's experiences are wasted. Everything we live through, every choice, is woven into a bigger design that's always available to us. Letting go of grudges is still a lesson I confront regularly. I revisit the same triggers that once led me to a breaking point, but each time I face a choice. Do I let this frustration define me again? Or do I approach it differently, trusting that letting it pass might open up new possibilities for empathy or connection? The difference now is that I can see with stark clarity how destructive it becomes when I hold hate in my body for too long. It's like holding burning coals in my hands, expecting someone else to be scorched. Where I live, tension still simmers. Long-held misconceptions remain. But if I can keep my mind from automatically labeling, keep my heart open, I've noticed breakthroughs happen that defy every negative expectation. That's the power of focusing attention in more energizing directions, like shining a flashlight on a path rather than staring at the dark. If enough people collectively embrace this approach, who knows what viral hack or trending now wave might lead us toward a more harmonious daily reality. Perhaps the real behind-the-scenes lesson is that we all store a luminous essence inside, untouched by trauma or prejudice. It's the same spark I felt when I drifted into that peaceful realm. Humans, at the core, are orbs of light, capable of profound love and wisdom. Our mistakes and flawed perceptions can obscure this brightness, but the spark never vanishes. When life's conflicts push us to the edge, we can either fall deeper into bitterness or release ourselves into an energy of surrender. My experience implies that choosing love over fear, acceptance over blame, can transform how we live and how we depart. In practical day-to-day terms, I've learned the easy methods or step-by-step tutorials for healing revolve around noticing the first signs of tension: a tensing jaw, a burning in the chest, a racing heart. Then, take a beat. Check if you're replaying an old script, like I once did, about how unfair everything is or how hopeless life becomes. Pause, breathe, and decide whether you want that storyline to rule yet another moment. Use whatever tools are accessible: prayer, meditation, mindful movement, creative expression, or simply seeking a friend's perspective. You'd be surprised how quickly the mind recovers its balance once you give it permission and space. I now consider the near-death event less a tragedy and more a revelation, a crucial turning point that taught me the entire human experience is fleeting, but also infinitely meaningful. We're each writing chapters of a universal story. None of the pages we pen truly vanish. They stay alive as possibilities that other souls can reference. This notion helped me reframe my regrets. Every painful memory can transform into a lesson, an example, even a message of hope for someone else. It's not that the memory erases itself. Instead, it becomes absorbed into a vast reservoir of insight that might help countless others navigate future challenges. One might ask how to best apply these insights in a world so fractured by differences and misunderstandings. The answer, surprising as it sounds, is often found in gestures of compassion that begin within ourselves. Show yourself kindness, and you'll find it simpler to show kindness to strangers who might look, speak, or believe differently. unpack emotions that have hardened into resentment. This is not about leniency for injustices, it's about not letting rage overshadow personal well-being or a greater capacity for empathy. Yes, I still see the difficulties around me, inequities, bigotry, endless debate. But I also see glimpses of people bridging divides. I notice communities forging alliances in ways that once seemed impossible. When I sense someone's fear or anger, I sometimes recall my moment of weightlessness, floating high above a wounded body. That memory reminds me, we're so much more than our conflict. We're luminous, but we forget it. If we can gather the readiness to see ourselves and one another as interconnected, we might trigger the latest trends in global healing, an evolution of consciousness where we realize that caring for each other actually benefits everyone. In practice, this demands consistent awareness. In these times, misinformation can spread like wildfire, feeding suspicion and reinforcing walls of hostility. We need improved how-to tutorials on verifying facts, adopting mindful communication, and interrupting the cycle of negativity. We need top 10 strategies for confronting prejudice and easy methods for releasing stress, or step-by-step guides for rewriting personal narratives that have grown toxic. At the heart of these solutions is the fact that every small shift in mindset can ripple out to others. There are voices who say that everything is pure chaos, that we're doomed to repeat our worst mistakes. But my experience calls me to believe otherwise. The mind, shaped by fear, will keep looking for nightmares. Yet the heart, opened by even a whisper of love, can uncover possibilities we never thought existed. The best practices for healing begin when we allow ourselves to feel compassion without boundaries. Even if that means showing grace to those who don't reciprocate, it's a better alternative than fueling the endless cycle of hatred. None of this means forgetting or becoming naive. The knowledge that certain groups or individuals still nurse harmful ideologies remains real. But I try not to let that overshadow the truth of who I am now, someone who survived a brush with mortality and glimpsed what might lie on the other side. In that illuminated space, the labels that cause heartache in everyday life simply dissolved. We have the power at any moment to release ourselves from mental cages. Yet freedom is a choice. We can pick up the old beliefs, or we can allow a new perspective to shape our present decisions. Even if I revisit the same old frustrations that once made me question the entire system, I approach them carefully. Is this frustration telling me something practical, or is it fueling a tired storyline that leads to illness? Each time, I can sense which path I'm choosing. It's a daily undertaking, never once and done. But now I know that if I fail or falter, I can steady myself again because I've touched that unbreakable light inside. When I look around, I realize how many souls walk through life burdened by invisible loads. Many of them don't even know what it's like to breathe freely, to set aside tension. The miracle is that each of us can learn, step by step, how to lighten those burdens. That journey might be messy, full of setbacks, but that's part of being human. It's possible to find new alignment with curiosity, love, and gratitude for the small wonders in an ordinary day. Ultimately, I share these reflections for anyone standing at their own crossroads, battling despair, or seeking the ultimate guide to forging peace in a troubled mind. It may not happen overnight. Transformation is more marathon than sprint. Yet every moment you consciously disengage from negativity opens a new window for understanding. The expansions of insight I experienced for just a few weightless minutes reveal that living from a place of acceptance and compassion can reshape reality in profound ways. My story is ongoing, an evolving tapestry of remembering and forgetting, of choosing fear or choosing love at each fork in the road. If there's a behind-the-scenes takeaway, it's that life holds more magnificence than our limited vision often suggests. We're each more powerful, more luminous, more crucial to one another's journeys than we realize. And no matter what storms plague our communities, relationships, or the planet itself, an unwavering unity lies beneath everything. A caring intelligence that, if we let it guide us, can shed the illusions of separation and bring us closer to the essence of who we truly are. So, as you navigate your challenges, whether they stem from old hurts, cultural biases, or personal grief, remember that a choice awaits you at every breath. There's a step-by-step roadmap within your own heart that can show you easy methods for compassion, perspective, and healing. Whether it's by seeking expert tips from mentors or leaning on faith, whether it's through therapy, journaling, or silent meditation, there are always paths forward that don't depend on staying mired in negativity. Empower yourself to explore, fail, learn, and rise again. Know that the luminous core you carry is always accessible, always waiting for the moment you decide it's safe to let go of your old burdens and simply shine.